Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we're going to cover all the local teams. The New Orleans Saints as they prepare for the Atlanta Falcons. Of course, the LSU Tigers coming off a win against Wisconsin, getting ready to take on Sam Houston. And the Tulane Green Wave coming off a heartbreaking loss to Tulsa, but opening up their brand new stadium this weekend against Georgia Tech. Joining us on the program tonight, Sean Fazan of Fox 8 Sports, and joining us shortly will be Brett Martell of the Associated Press. But Sean, I always like to start the show off, kind of find out a little bit about what's going on with you and what's happening with Fox 8. And I know you got to be stoked. This is well, for really, you're nonstop from this point forward in terms of work, but my gosh, it's football season again.
It is football season, and it's that point of the year where I got to remind myself what day it is, quite frankly, because everything just kind of blends together, and there's so much that's going on right now. But you know what? It's Saints season tonight. We have our game plan show.
Yes.
Thursday night airs on Fox 8 at 10:30. We're getting back into the prep football business, which we are extremely excited about. We've got such a great reception from all the prep coaches and all the high schools around the city and the area. That's going to air on Friday nights. It's called Fox 8 Football Friday at 10:35 on Fox 8. And on Sunday nights, obviously, we have our final play show where we wrap it all up. And don't forget about our pregame show.
That's right.
Fox 8 live tailgate from 10 to 11 every noon game on Fox 8. So, boy, there's a lot to work on, a lot of stuff happening, but this is what we do. We love it.
One of the great things about Sean also is, again, whether he's at the game, whether he's at practice, whether, again, he's at the Fox 8 facility, he's constantly on social media and let you know what's going on. Throw the Twitter feed out there for him and let him know because, again, you're a great follow.
At Sean Fazan, SeanFazende. That's my Twitter handle. Tweeting away, and at this point, at this stage of the calendar, the Twitter handle is very active, let's say that, especially over the last few days with the Saints. But that's the best way to keep up what I'm doing, and I also have the blog after further review on fox8live.com.
A great blog, folks. You definitely got to check it out. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. Brett Martell's going to join us on the program. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Don't go anywhere.
Reggie. Just recently, my wife and I took in her sister's children. Now, we already had 4, so I went from becoming a family man to a man with a bigger family. Now, you can't eat love, so I don't know how I'm gonna feed them tonight. How was that, Rich?
I think I look more like Denzel.
That's cold, man.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
Packers. Viking. Packers. Viking. Viking.
Red state, blue state, vegan.
Carnivore.
We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown.
Optimist.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full.
But when we live united, we create real, lasting change in the building blocks of life. The education, income, and health of our communities,
Live.
our families,
United.
even the person next to us.
Live united.
Real change won't happen without you. So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up at liveunited.org.
You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television. Find us on Cox Channel 14, Charter Channel 11 and 711, AT&T Channel 32 and 1032, Dish TV, DirecTV, and over-the-air broadcast on Channel 32.
Know what?
What?
Since I got adopted, I've learned a lot about these humans.
I know. I mean, check out these two. It's Flirt City over here.
Yeah, I noticed that. It looks like my human is definitely into your human.
Oh, look! I think she's getting his number.
Nice.
Your human's got some sweet moves.
Takes after his dog. Oh, look, they're doing that thing where they put their arms around each other.
She kicked up a leg. It's like in the movies.
That's awesome. Looks like we're gonna be hanging out a little bit more.
Hi, we're Ola High, and you're watching WLAE TV.
In the search for beautiful people, music that moves, and real culture, America, there's only one LA Coast. Go Coast, Louisiana delivers the treasures of the Gulf, fresh to you.
I think we need a bigger boat.
Sundays at 8:30 p.m. on LAE.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher, along with Sean Vazan and Brett Martell. Brett, welcome to the show. As we always do before we kick it off, tell the folks a little bit about what you're doing with the Associated Press.
Sure. I'm the AP's only sports writer in the state of Louisiana, so I just try to report to the world from here on all the major sporting events, be it the NFL, NBA, and major college sports, PGA. And so right now it's very football heavy.
Yes. Going from one stadium to another, from Baton Rouge to Yeoman Stadium and, of course, to the Dome as well. Guys, let's get started. We'll talk a little Saints first. Junior Galette signs a 4-year, $41.5 million contract, $23 million of that guaranteed. He's a guy that had to work his way up, Stillman College. You got to feel good for this guy. The only thing, as I mentioned on the radio show today, that I would be a little bit cautious when a guy, sometimes when guys in the NFL, they achieve that first big contract, they tend to, they can rest on their laurels. I don't know if that's in Junior Galette's DNA. He's never been an All-Pro. He's never been in a Pro Bowl. Those are goals he has to achieve. Obviously, they want to get to a second Super Bowl. But you got to like, first of all, the fact he's going to be in the fold for the next 4 years, and the fact that he's worked so hard to achieve this.
Look, I think we all know that the Saints have become sort of the undrafted home, the undrafted haven of the NFL. And I think of all the guys, Lance Moore, Pierre Thomas, De La Puente, Jed Collins, I think Junior Galette is number one on my list, given where he was to what he has now become. 4 years, $41 million, 23 guaranteed. Interesting. That's almost identical to Jimmy Graham's numbers. And 2015, after the 2015 season would have been interesting because Cam Jordan, Akeem Hicks, and Junior Galette would have all been free agents. So to get this done now, certainly a good thing. It was kind of interesting to see how it all transpired because he flat out denied it 2 days ago. Then all of a sudden, yesterday he was able to, sign his check, so to speak, and he was a happy camper in the locker room. It's good to see. It was genuine. And look, he came from nothing. He really did. To now, he's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. So good for him, for Junior Galette, and he's a good player. He's a good teammate to have.
Right, and it was, as you mentioned, good to get him under the fold now because you got some real big contracts going to be coming up down the line. Brett, what's your take?
Well, the reason he denied it is because I think when you look at his background, he lived in Haiti until he was 10, relatively poor, went on scholarship first to Temple, and then because a relative who was staying with him was caught with a stolen laptop at Temple, you were responsible for anything that happens, even if it doesn't involve you, but involves someone that's staying with you. So he got kicked out for that reason. He really didn't do anything wrong. Had to finish his career at Division II Stillman. And he knew that his agent was working on this deal. He wanted his agent to get it done, but he didn't, until it was actually signed, he just, he couldn't, he was afraid to jinx it. He was afraid. I mean, it was such a big moment for him. And so, of course, after he finally was able to sign it, and he went up, he described a scene where he went directly from practice, in his sweaty pads, up to an upstairs office at headquarters and signed that thing as soon as he possibly could to lock it in, and then said how happy he was for to be able to know he can provide for his 11-month-old son. And it's a great story, and it's funny because you look at the two defensive ends; they're almost equal production. He was a half sack behind Cam Jordan. Cameron Jordan has the pedigree. His father played in the NFL. He's a first-round draft pick out of a major, Pac-10 school. And here's on the other, edge is a guy from the opposite background.
And I like the fact that we brought up the J.J. Watt contract, and he basically said, how much is enough? I mean, I got more money than I'll ever spend now for the rest of my life. And that was it was kind of they're rewarding me, but I don't want to get greedy with this. This is a very fair contract, and you don't normally see that in this day and age, especially at that position where pass rushers get paid. So it was a good day all the way around for Junior Galette.
Well, and look, New Orleans embraces this type of blue-collar guy, and then he's come up the hard way. A lot of folks in New Orleans come up the hard way, and I think the fans will embrace that. And look, from a cap standpoint, I don't know how Mickey Loomis is doing it, but you got to give him kudos to get this done now. So again, you're going to have cap room down the line with, as you mentioned, Cam Jordan and Keem Hicks coming up in 2015.
Yeah, and then look, price of success. We kind of keep going back to that because the more you win, the more primetime your players are, the more they want to get paid, and the higher volume of players that want to get paid. And look, it's coming on the defensive side of the ball. So after 2015 is going to be an interesting year for sure.
Brett, final cuts. Any surprises in your mind as you went down the final roster cuts for this team? I mean, they really kind of manipulated the roster really in the last few days to be able to get to their final 53. But overall, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think everybody was surprised that they cut all of their place kickers. But with hindsight being 2020, you kind of understand why they did it and why they felt there was minimal risk of Shane Graham being, snapped up. So,
was it true they had a handshake agreement with Graham? I mean, it's been speculated that.
I mean, that's very possible.
Because Demke did go and try out for the Jacksonville Jaguars within a couple days of being cut.
What I think is more likely than a handshake agreement is that they told Shane Graham what their plan was, so that he would be inclined not to look elsewhere. You tell his agent, don't start calling other teams because the Saints want me back as soon as they can fiddle with the roster according to timelines for short-term injury reserve, which they ended up putting Kyrie Ford on and things like that. Now, Champ Bailey, I thought they would give him more time. And people asked me if I was shocked that they cut him, and I said, well, no, I'm not shocked. I'm just a little surprised because if you look at how he performed and what his age was and the fact that he wasn't going to be on special teams, it was a practical move to cut him.
Right.
But I just somehow thought that given his leadership and his resume that he would get a little more time to prove what he can do.
Yeah, so did I. How about you, Sean?
Mild surprise with Champ Bailey. Brian Dixon really, to me, looked like a practice squad guy, and so now he's on the final 53. What the final 53 ultimately became is not surprising. The route they took to get there was a little bit shocking. They wanted 4 guys in the organization, but they only had 2 roster spots, and they did this crazy sort of cut down clinic to kind of get it going. They got 4 to the short-term IR. They got Ryan Griffin on the practice squad, Shane Graham back, Robert Meacham back. And I talked to Meacham today, and he said there were some calls from other teams that were interested in his services, but he said, I wanted to stay home, and he knew the call was going to come from the Saints. He said he had talked to Coach Payton before he was released that he's going to do everything he can to get him back, basically saying, don't go anywhere. I'm going to call you back very soon here. So Meacham is back. Kyrie Ford going to short-term IR, to me, is not a surprise. You just wonder, is it good to burn it on him at this point? I know it's been a topic for us the last couple days, and I guess we shall see, but there's going to be a risk involved with that no matter what. It's either short-term IR or redshirt him completely. So clearly they think when he comes back, he'll be able to contribute in some way.
Right. Well, and look, getting back to the Champ Bailey thing, to me, it was surprising. Again, I think there was that report from NFL Post that said that Bailey was going to be cut. That was really early in training camp, and I mean, everybody kind of downplayed it. I did. I downplayed it. I'm saying, how can you make this comment when we're just so early into camp that this is going to happen? The injuries probably set him back, no doubt about that. But I'm not sold on Patrick Robinson. I mean, you look at what happened in the Tennessee preseason game. They didn't even go to Champ Bailey's side because of reputation. They went right at Patrick Robinson, and again, he wasn't that successful. It'll be interesting to see what happens now. When all of a sudden you had a veteran guy who you were going to use the nickel or the dime, maybe a guy that could start for you if you had some injuries in Champ Bailey, because it was pretty evident that he wasn't going to start. But now your depth is not as deep as maybe you thought it was going to be. With again, Bailey not being there.
I know Robinson struggled the 4th preseason game, but I thought he won that battle with Champ Bailey as far as the starter.
You guys saw a lot of practice.
I thought Patrick Robinson beat Champ Bailey out for that starting job, and I still thought Champ Bailey was going to make the final roster. I didn't see anything great from Bailey, but I didn't see any bad plays from Bailey either. So he was kind of stuck in the middle there, and like you said, in that final game where he played, he got hurt a little bit, which seemed to be very annoyed with, and then they didn't go to his side much. He played some run support, but other than that, he really didn't do much. So he was kind of one of those pretty vanilla training camps for him. So, but I'm not shocked that Patrick Robinson beat him out, because I felt like on the field, when we watched them practice, he beat him out.
What are your thoughts about Patrick Robinson? Are they solid opposite Keenan Lewis? Because look, they're not going to go after Keenan Lewis. They're going after Patrick Robinson. I mean, that's pretty obvious.
Well, Robinson was their interceptions leader a few seasons ago, and he, I think it was 2012, right? He did look, we just look younger and more vigorous, like as he is, and healthier in training camp and all throughout practice, and Champ Bailey did. But at the same time, sometimes veteran players make up for their declining physical skills with just positional soundness.
Yes.
I didn't see Champ give up any really bad plays when he was in those last 2 preseason games. I mean, I saw him give up like a 9-yard out on the first drive he was in.
But what about practice? How was he? Because that's something we didn't get a chance to see. We saw him in the exhibition games, but we didn't get to see him like you guys did when he was healthy in practice. How did he perform there?
Well, we didn't really see him a lot healthy in practice either, I guess. They were really taking it easy on him. And he never really stood out. He never stood out for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, I would say.
That's kind of what I was getting at. I mean, I didn't see anything great. I didn't see anything terrible. He was involved. The play where he got hurt, we suspect, was on a play where he got beat by Nick Toon. That's the play we suspect he got hurt. That was one of the few times I saw him get beat. That was so early in camp. Then he was out for the next couple weeks. He got back in. I can only recall one interception throughout camp, and that was back here in New Orleans. It was a bad throw by Luke McCown. I just felt like when you put those two guys up, based on what we saw all preseason and training camp, I thought Patrick Robinson beat him out. Now, you're right. Patrick Robinson is going to have a target on his back throughout. So he's going to have to step up and make some plays, but there's no doubt he's going to get targeted.
Right. What about the depth behind now Patrick Robinson and Keenan Lewis? Obviously, when you look at where they are, they've got some unproven guys. They got some players that have had a chance to prove themselves over the last year. Brett, I'll go with you first. How does this cornerback position look? Obviously, they're very solid with Keenan Lewis. After that.
Yeah, well, it's a vote of confidence for Corey White. And the other thing is that when they do the 3 safety lineup, so you have Raphael Bush, that you can manage nickel that way. So I would imagine the dime defense is going to just have the 3 safeties along with Corey White and the 2 starting cornerbacks. And then, if somebody gets hurt, that's when you start getting into players that are not very proven and pretty young. But they felt like those guys could contribute on special teams more likely than someone like Champ Bailey.
And I think, as crazy as this sounds, despite the question mark at the opposite of Keenan Lewis, I think the secondary is going to be the most improved unit on this defense this year because I think they're going to be more takeaways, going to be more active to the ball. And you said there's such position flexibility with your safeties. You talk about Vaccaro, and then you bring in a guy. Corey White really had a good camp, I felt like, and a good preseason. And if Patrick Robinson does struggle, Robinson also played a little bit of nickel during camp and preseason as well. So maybe you can rotate those guys. It's a question mark, but every team is going to have one question mark on their team. And I think ultimately this secondary is going to be okay.
Yeah. The practice squad. One of the things that really kind of shocked me was I was surprised that no one that the Saints cut was picked up by another team. Now, again, as you mentioned, there were some calls that went out to some players that obviously didn't take those calls, stayed with the team. But I fully expected that some of the guys that would have been the 55th to maybe 60th player on this team might have had a chance to hook on with another team rather than get to the Saints practice squad. How do you think that practice squad kind of filled out? They pretty much didn't lose anybody.
I think who knows what their final look was. Obviously, when you bring a guy back to the practice squad, you see some potential in him. I can't imagine it can go much better for the Saints, especially when you consider now they have Ryan Griffin back on that practice squad. A guy like Pierre Warren, the list goes on. So I think ultimately they got exactly what they wanted. I was a little bit surprised, though. I thought Derek Strozier had a decent camp in preseason, that he wasn't brought back to the practice squad. But overall, I don't see how you could look at it and say that's a bad thing. I think overall they got exactly what they wanted with this 10-guy practice squad.
Yeah, and the receivers that they were able to keep too, because they clearly wanted
Jones
to
and
those,
Coleman.
Right, those tall guys. And so they got back the 2 best receivers that they couldn't keep on the 53, probably the quarterback that they initially kept and then had to fiddle around with, and probably the best young defensive back that they weren't able to keep is back.
What about Ryan Griffin? There were a lot of us that thought that he had made that jump, that he was going to be the second string quarterback. Obviously, this team with Drew Brees getting a little bit up in age, wanted a veteran signal caller behind him. I think that was probably one of the things they talked about. But they did gamble a little bit in waiving him Your thoughts, Sean?
Well, I guess they play the percentages perfectly by waiting till Tuesday to waive him, because you can't tell me, especially a team like St. Louis that is in need of a quarterback, wouldn't have snatched a guy like Ryan Griffin up. They wanted him last year.
Yes.
So obviously the Saints were able to play the percentages, but it was still a gamble. I don't know if you picked up on this. I don't know if you talked to Ryan today, but we caught the last little bit of his interview. He seemed, it was surprising to him because he thought he had made the final roster, which we all felt like they were going to keep 3 this year. And he looked, he was saying all the right things, but he looked a little bit bummed that he's back on the practice squad. It almost seemed like he felt like he did well enough to get on that active roster. The problem is, there's just so few roster spots. You only have 53, and quite frankly, the Saints needed that roster spot, but they want to keep him in the program, and right now the practice squad is the best way to keep him.
Well, he took a step back in the last 2 preseason games, and McCown was clearly the better quarterback in those games, and McCown has been doing the place kick holding.
That's it. Right.
And so he had to understand that a third quarterback is a luxury on a 53-man roster, and so it does. I'm sure it feels like a step back to him, and I'm sure it's disappointing. So he should just talk to Drew Brees about bouncing back from adversity, because that's Drew Brees' middle name, basically.
Come on. You know it is. A little surprised when we start talking about short-term IR that Eric Lorig was not the choice there. I got to believe that at least the organization feels that he's not that far away with his ankle. The interesting thing is, what do you do with Austin Johnson, who has played pretty well in the preseason, who's probably caught the eye of some other teams, even though, again, the fullback position is a diminishing position in the NFL, but there are some teams out there that are looking for quality fullbacks. They're going to have a little bit of a problem here.
That clearly, and I guess again you got to sort of play the percentages here and see what happens. You know, Lorig, we didn't see much of at all, and honestly, I had actually, maybe I'm alone in this, I actually thought even when he was healthy, Austin Johnson was playing better than him. Austin Johnson has really improved, but Lorig, clearly they feel like Lorig is close, at least close enough to not use the IR with designation to return. So that was interesting to see, and if you had to bring him back and cut a guy like Johnson, does he slip through waivers? I don't know, but again, it's just this, Coach Payton talked about it today, managing this roster. It's a very living thing here. It's not set in stone. You know, it's a very fluid situation. You just have to do the best you can when the situation presents itself.
Yeah, I mean, I also thought that Lorig was the best candidate for the short-term IR, and so they must think he's going to be back within, 4 to 5 weeks, I guess, or maybe even less. It's really hard for us to know because they don't disclose much and we don't see him.
Sure.
So Austin Johnson may just be someone they have to lose, depending on how the numbers work out. The Saints are good about having versatile tight ends who can fill in as backup fullbacks, and I don't know if Josh Hill might end up in a role like that. So they would just, if they really felt like Lorig was the guy to go with when he was healthy, they may just have to let Austin Johnson go.
Goodwin is the starting center now for this team. I mean, has it been officially announced at this point? No, but I guess you got to figure that he's going to be, right?
We can just basically infer it.
Yeah.
It's been implied in the locker room by comments that everyone's making and so forth. So no one wants to talk out of turn, and Sean's not going to say.
Right.
Goodwin's the starter. I mean, I would be thoroughly shocked if he was not the starter come Sunday in Atlanta.
Guys, how much does this offense evolve now? You've lost Aaron Sproles, you bring in a Brandon Cooks, you got more speed now when you got a guy like Kenny Stills on the field to go with a Joe Morgan who's healthy. You look at the running back position, all those guys seem like they're healthy and they're ready, they're primed for a big season. You went out and got Lorig because he's a better blocker. Austin Johnson is a pretty darn good blocker. They're saying they're going to run the football. I talked about it a little bit today. You won't see a 50-50. If you're lucky if you get 60-40, but if you get 60-40, that's a good thing, with 60 being the pass. Sean, what do you think? Do we see a little different offense now out of the Saints because of realizing they got to run the football to really protect the defense, but also maybe to keep Drew Brees healthy?
Maybe some new concepts. I think a lot of the basic principles will be there, but two things are different. And I've said this since he's been drafted, Brandon Cooks is a different player completely than what they've had in years past. He's a Lance Moore, Darren Sproles hybrid that can also get downfield. So he adds a dimension that they've never had a guy that can take a wide receiver screen and go 60 yards untouched. They've never had that before. And a 5'10" guy that can go up on the sideline and catch a pass as well. So in that regard, in the passing game, that adds a new dimension. And also, you mentioned the run game. I've always believed this since that Philadelphia game. there is a confidence now. They believe they can do it. And a lot of that comes from a guy like Teron Armstead on the left side. They're not just running on one side of the field. Last year when they had all this success until Armstead was shifted into the lineup, it was all on the right side of the field. Now, you watch Teron Armstead block. He moves guys out of the way. I mean, it's amazing to watch him run block. And I think you're starting to see a belief that they can do it, which gives the coaches confidence, which also gives them what I would call game plan diversity. Now you're not necessarily running when you have to. You're running because you want to run, and they can be successful at it. I felt like the Philadelphia game was a turning point, and as I've said many times, they had the right game plan against Seattle.
Yes.
They did. They ran right at them, and they were successful in doing so. So I think you combine those two elements, a few new wrinkles to this offense this year.
Yeah, I think that the proof, if you look at the snaps and the play selection, was that last year they believed in the importance of the running game and were having trouble executing it because it was a transitional year, first year in the zone blocking scheme. And that can be a difficult adjustment for linemen because all of a sudden, when they're on the line of scrimmage, they no longer know who they're blocking until they've started the play.
Right.
And then they have to see how the defense moves and then block the guy in that gap.
Yes.
And so it takes a while to get comfortable with that. And it's a feel, it only takes a while for the linemen to get comfortable with who they're blocking. It takes a while for a guy like Mark Ingram to get a sense of where the gap is going to open up and how his line, he's got to have chemistry with the linemen and get a sense of who they have leverage on and where is his best cutback. Because it's basically what, at some point, he's supposed to recognize where the cutback is and dart upfield. They look a lot better at that this year. And they were trying hard to get it last year, and they finally got it at the end of the year. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it this year.
I think in the passing game, with the addition of Brandon Cooks, obviously he opens up a whole new plethora of plays for you. But I think the one player that is going to really benefit from having him on the field is Jimmy Graham. No longer can a corner come on and take Jimmy Graham on. It's going to be tough to double team Jimmy Graham now. Too many weapons on the field. Brett, what are your thoughts about what Cooks is going to bring to the table, and how does he help really the offense as a whole now because of the threat of his speed?
I think that if he's able to harness some of what he showed us in practice, I was a little disappointed that after the first preseason game we didn't see more of that in game situations, and maybe that just had something to do with play selection and how they were using them and who they felt like they needed to see. Preseason is difficult to read because coaches are trying to isolate certain guys in certain situations that may be even unfavorable to them just in order to evaluate them.
Sure.
But Cooks oftentimes during 11-on-11s not only looked like a great rookie, I've said, I think this on your radio show, he looked like the best guy on the field sometimes. So if he's able to replicate that in game situations, then he's going to really punish opponents for favoring their coverage toward Graham and Colston, as they did a lot last year.
Yes.
And the thing is, he's gone. If he's in the open field, he's almost as sure as gone.
Oh, right.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I saw Saints DBs just kind of giving up, chasing him, because they knew they weren't going to catch him. So just save the energy for the next repetition.
Right. I think teams will find out, defenses will find out real quick. They want to put their best player on Jimmy Graham, how disastrous that can be for that defense. I think when teams go to game plan the Saints, it may not be right away, but week 4, week 5, all of a sudden number 10 is going to start showing up on that game tape, and so I think it forces the defense into different sort of coverages. It forces them into different type of game plans. And let's be honest, not many defenses have the depth to cover across the board what the Saints are able to do offensively.
With that said, game day, who is going to be activated in terms of wide receivers in your mind?
Well, I would think 4, right? It would be
Morgan,
Meacham,
right?
Morgan. I would think at this point I'm still leaning towards 2 not active. Meacham, Morgan, Cooks, and of course Colston.
Right.
Yeah. I think that Tune will have to earn his way back into being active, or if Colston, who's been injured more often late in his career, then Tune may be the guy to step into that role.
When you look at this team, for the most part, under the Peyton era, and I think we saw really a lack of it in 2012 when he was suspended, the discipline, again, not putting himself in the position of unforced errors, missed assignments. It's kind of been the mantra of this team under Peyton. It's demanding, on both sides of the ball. You got some turnover in the roster now. Will we see that week 1 against Atlanta? Will we see a disciplined team coming out that's not going to hurt itself?
I would think so. I mean, precision is the name of the game, and Coach Payton's team, period. Offensively, defensively, they want precision. They want dumb players. They want players that are going to beat themselves. And the 22 penalty game may have been the best thing that ever happened to him, quite frankly, because it's one of those kind of crisis moments where you can kind of jump in. It's clear, and it's and Payton is great at recognizing those moments and really taking advantage of it. And look, by the last preseason game, they had 1. So we're talking about a full turnaround. So I think that aspect of the game is going to be cleaned up, and that'll be, if that were to happen again during the season, it'll be the exception, not the rule. I think this team is still going to be very disciplined.
Yeah, I would agree that that at this point they'd be no more susceptible to that than any of their opponents in terms of missed assignments and penalties. So if anything, they would have the advantage in the majority of those games. And I was gonna, if you hadn't mentioned it, I was gonna mention Payton's penchant for creating crises.
Yes.
He's written about it, so it's no secret. He wrote about it in Home Team after they won the Super Bowl and what he did with Media Day. And so, you know, it seemed like that was an obvious opportunity for him when they had all those penalties, and the point got across, and they've cleaned it up.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night right here on WLAE TV, 6 o'clock with our live broadcast, each and every Friday night with our rebroadcast on WLAE TV and Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette at 10 p.m. Sean Vazana, Fox 8 Sports, Brett Martell, the Associated Press, join us on the program tonight. We'll take a quick pause. Your calls are welcome at 866-3200. We'll come back. We'll touch a little bit on the defense, then we'll get into LSU and Tulane. Don't go anywhere.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by
You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television. Find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Talking a little Saints right now, 866-3200. We'll touch on Tulane and LSU coming up. Guys, the one great thing about this team as opposed to other teams in the Payton era, even when Greg Williams was masking the deficiencies in 2009 with the 39 turnovers, this is a bona fide defense. From the defensive line to the secondary, you know, maybe the weakest link is the linebacking core, and again, they're not that weak. Sean, I'll take you first. Man, what's the ceiling on this defense this year?
Well, look, they were number 4 total defense last year without anyone that can really take the ball away. They have that this year. You have a shutdown corner in Keenan Lewis. You have an up-and-coming star in Kenny Vaccaro. You have an underrated player in Raphael Bush. You have a guy in Patrick Robinson who we already talked about, but I think ultimately they'll be okay with him. You have a defensive line that has Junior Gillette, Cam Jordan, Akeem Hicks is just going to be ridiculously good this year. You mentioned the linebackers; they're deep. Even get to the second tier guys of Tyron Walker and Glenn Foster, and even a Brandon Dederick type.
Right.
So they're deep. They're playmakers. They've got some confidence. They're in the second year of the system, which Cam Jordan tells us about all the time. This is the first time he's ever played where it's the same defense he's played in. So I think you're talking about a team, why be scared of it? They can be a Seattle Seahawks type defense.
I agree with that. Brett, do you?
Yeah, and also John Jenkins, his second year, not only in the system but in the league. He showed promise as a rookie, so we'll have to see if he can make that second year jump. But on the interior of the defensive line, they look strong, and obviously from the edge, they look strong, and the linebackers are good. Hawthorne and Lofton are good linebackers.
They're good linebackers. They're good, right?
They are.
Good, yeah, and Lofton is good at calling the defense, but he's not only positionally sound. Those guys can hit and they can tackle. So.
Yes.
They should be in great shape. I mean, the key is really with any defense. I think the key is always injuries, and it's amazing how well they did last year despite injuries. So if they stay healthy, they could be a real force.
Right. Which I think is the key. And one of the things we saw last year was an Atlanta Falcon team that was not healthy. And you saw the quick demise of that franchise. They were a little bit exposed because their offensive line, they had lost a lot on their offensive line. That was a rebuilding. Talk about this Atlanta Falcon team, what the Saints are going to have to deal with when they head to Atlanta to take on Atlanta in Game 1 in the Georgia Dome.
Well, I didn't catch a lot of Hard Knocks, but I've read about it. I caught a little bit of it. It seemed like the Saints came up a few times in that show. And I know Arthur Blank has constantly made the reference to the Kenny Vaccaro hit, how no one helped his quarterback up. And it seemed to have been the sort of the theme for their whole offseason, which was to get tougher, this and that. So even regardless of before any of that, it's Saints-Falcons. It's going to be close. It's going to be a ruckus crowd. It's going to be intense. So I would expect another close game, but I just can't get past the fact that Sean Payton seems to just be in Mike Smith's head a little bit. And I think it's going to be a close back and forth game, but I think ultimately Saints win.
Well, that's a tough game to win because they do have so much to prove after last year, and they are healthy and they are at home. I think the Saints are perfectly capable of winning it. I just wouldn't necessarily believe that the sky is falling if they end up losing. People talk a lot about momentum and the importance of the first game, and I always think back, I'll just never forget seeing New England Patriots in 2003 go into Buffalo and lose 31-0 and then go 15-1 the rest of the way and win the Super Bowl. Sometimes sometimes you need to be routed to wake everybody up.
Wake them up, right.
But I mean, obviously here, I think the Saints know that even last year, the second game was close. Both games were close last year, and they just know that these games are always close, and they'll be ready. I just can't wait to see the Falcon passing game against the Saints, pass rush / improve secondary, and how that plays out.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. What about the ceiling for this team this year? They got a lot of publications that have the Saints in the Super Bowl. I mean, I think they're as good as anybody in the NFL, honestly, if they're healthy, especially if Drew Brees is healthy. Sean, what do you think? What do you think as you look in your crystal ball at the upcoming season?
Best roster I've ever seen going into a season. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, let's name one weakness. I mean, do we have one yet? I mean, Pro Bowl tight end, Hall of Fame quarterback, good offensive line. We talked about the defense. You added some dynamic rookies, improved running game, a great head coach, elite head coach, experience. Best team I've ever seen going into a season, quite frankly. Right. And they, knock on wood, fairly healthy at this point. They only had 3 guys on the practice injury report this week. So it's just a matter of managing the expectations and just kind of winning this weekly war that you have to do week in and week out. Because as we know, it's you don't win the games on paper, you win them on the field. And I think they have the right leadership in the locker room as well. So. I'm waiting to find the big weakness here, and I can't really find it. So all the Super Bowl expectations or Super Bowl predictions, I mean, they all have merit. This is, to me, the best team I've ever seen going into a season.
Brett?
I would just say that in 2011, I thought the offense going into the season, and of course that offense set records. I don't know if this offense looks quite as good as that offense, only because you had Sproles in his prime and more proven guys in their prime. Colston was younger and so forth. And Jimmy Graham was going into his second year and ready to make that huge jump. And now they have a lot of young guys they're depending on, and then also depending on some older guys. The defense, though, looks better. And if you combine the offense and the defensive personnel, it does maybe look like the best roster that we've seen in the Payton era.
Yes. Let's shift gears and talk about the LSU Tigers. They got a big win against Wisconsin, 28-24. Surely didn't look good in the first half. I got to give a lot of credit to John Chavis and Cam Cameron. The Tigers really look outmatched in the first half. Wisconsin was out physical on both sides of the football. Didn't look good for them. And then, of course, they went in at halftime. They made some adjustments, especially on the defensive side where they started doing run blitzes. On the offensive side where they went to 3 wides, kind of spread out Wisconsin. Now, again, there were some injury situations. Wisconsin loses 2 of their interior defensive linemen. They didn't have a lot of depth there. Their top running back gets the hip flexor. But you got to like the way the kind of Tigers turned it around. But you also got to look at this and say, wow, maybe this offense and defensive line is not as good as a lot of people forecast them to be going into the season. Sean, what is your take on this LSU Tiger team? And first of all, about the adjustments, then let's morph into the offensive and defensive lines, because I think that's going to be the tail of the tape for this season going forward.
Well, first off, they look like a team that's young. They look like a team that hadn't played a lot of football together. I mean, on that defensive line as you mentioned, and you know, quarterback, running back. But I felt like Wisconsin. I don't think LSU was prepared for Wisconsin. You know their strength, but they were they looked faster to me than I've ever seen a Wisconsin team be, especially on the edge. You saw it on the first touchdown. So I felt like they had to kind of adjust themselves to the speed. They were able to kind of turn it on in the second half, and as Les customarily does, all of a sudden it was the credit to him for calling that, you know, the fake punt, which. They didn't have all the right personnel on the field, we come to find out, but somehow it still works, just playing it less, how it always manages to work itself out. But I think this is still very much a young team. I think the best thing that happens now, they got that win, have a few games here to kind of get some reps together in a game-like situation before you start the SEC play in a couple of weeks. So I don't know what to make of the game. It was good that they finished, and I love the wide receivers. I thought the wide receivers played well, even without Malachi Dupree. Yes. But I think overall, I think let's kind of wait and see how this goes. And I think that the best thing is they have a couple games here to really kind of get their legs under them a little bit and hopefully get ready for SEC.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, I know a lot of the fans wonder with Les Miles, does he pull these trick plays out of desperation, or is he just really showing confidence in his guys? I mean, I think he's more calculated than he appears.
Yes.
You know, because just his outward communication skills are a little zany.
Crazy like a fox.
Yeah. But, yeah, and talking about personnel, one of the personnel problems with that play was that Wisconsin didn't have the special teams personnel that LSU was expecting. They had more defensive guys, and so they were worried about that too. And he still, instead of calling timeout and reevaluating, he gave his guys a shot to pull it off, and they did. And it was a momentum changer in that game. I think that the game was a testament, though, to how good their offensive line can be, because oftentimes when you're relying on the running game, you do have to wear teams down over time. And of course they did have injuries, Wisconsin did, but Wisconsin's defense was gassed at the end, and the holes were enormous. And Kenny Hilliard's touchdown run, I mean, anyone could have gone. I mean, I could have scored on that one, I think, you know.
Sure. Maybe I could have.
So, yeah, I think the offensive line can be good. The defensive line, though, yeah, they've got a little work to do. They really expected big things out of Daniil Hunter
and Rasco.
Yeah.
And I thought both guys really didn't play, and Lakator as well in the middle. You know, I liked what Gottschall did more, and some of the younger players did on the defensive line more than what I expected out of the more seasoned players. And the same thing on the offensive line. You know, until they went to really kind of the three wides and kind of spread Wisconsin out a bit, they were having problems running the football. And look, I agree to your point that, yeah, they wore Wisconsin down over time. I think the injuries had something to do with it, but we all off season, all we heard was we're going to protect our quarterback, we're going to run the football with our stable of running backs, and we're going to do it on the backs of this offensive line. If this offensive line, if they perform like they did against Wisconsin in the first half against the SEC, where you don't have multi-dimensional, I mean, Wisconsin really, when you start looking at Wisconsin, really on both sides of the ball, kind of one-dimensional when you look at them. I think they're going to have some real problems.
Well, I go back to my original point, because I actually felt like defensively, too, I thought Wisconsin was faster than maybe they thought.
I would agree with you,
And it looked like LSU was a little bit shell-shocked at how fast they were, and they were just getting beat, and then it took them a while to readjust, kind of find where they were, and deep down, and obviously LSU was the more talented team, and eventually they were able to kind of wear them out. But this is sort of what you get when you have so many new faces and so many freshmen having to play, and so many freshmen you have to kind of count on. And look, Anthony Jennings is a sophomore, but let's be honest, he's basically a freshman playing quarterback right now. So I wait and see. But I think you kind of have your notes circled. Okay, offensive line, defensive line. Let's see what happens over these next few games when we get to SEC play and see what happens. But I do think it's fair to be critical of those two units because, quite frankly, there was a lot more expected out of them.
Right. Anthony Jennings, again, for everything that was talked about in the offseason that Brandon Harris was going to be the guy, he didn't look like he was ready to go, honestly. And you got to give Jennings a lot of credit. One of the things that I really was impressed with was throwing to a spot. I mean, that's what NFL quarterbacks do. He wasn't waiting for the receiver to get to the spot. He was throwing it to where the receiver was going to be. And they turned into some really big plays. And, Sean, you mentioned the wide receiving core. You know, when you look at all the guys they left that went to the pros, they got a solid group right there that, even though they're young, they look like they're ready to make that next step.
Well, I'm not quite as complimentary of Jennings maybe as you are, because I thought I saw one NFL throw, and that was the throw right after the fake punt. I thought the DR's touchdown was more on him. I thought,
but the throw was perfect.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That was the best throw of the night. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But he looked a little confused to me early in the game. And I can understand why there's still an open competition there. Although obviously Jennings is going to get first crack. But I do think wide receiver, when the rollouts, the kind of underneath routes with guys like Trey Quinn, you saw Durrell, you saw guys like John Diar's making plays. I think eventually that chemistry can come together, but I'm not ready to say Jennings is the guy yet. I thought he played okay in the second half, but I'm not ready to say he's the guy yet for LSU.
Brett, your thoughts on the quarterback and the receiving corps?
Jennings is easy to underestimate in this circumstance because Harris has more impressive physical stature. He's taller, stronger arm. I think he runs faster too, but I just think that Les Miles really cares about the quarterback's management ability of the offense and decision making in terms of not turning the ball over. And I think Les was looking at, he's been clean on the snaps, clean on the handoffs, no fumbles, no interceptions. He missed a few throws, but he just thought, you know what, we're falling behind in this game. We can't afford a rookie mistake now.
Yes.
So Jennings just got to stay in the rest of the way, and then when he got comfortable, he got very effective.
And they got him out on the edge a little bit too.
Yeah.
They didn't make him stay in the pocket, which I thought really helped him.
And clearly he has chemistry with Trayvon Durrell, who caught the game-winning touchdown pass last year against Arkansas.
That's right. Yes.
And so he made some very nice throws in the second half that showed his potential to be a good finesse quarterback in the passing game, and but he did look lost. You're right. Like some of those throws, I didn't know where they were going.
I'll agree with you on the point about managing the game, because he mistake free as far as turnovers. I know they had one fumble, but that really wasn't his fault. But I don't know about you guys, but I'm not ready to name him the guy yet. Maybe you guys disagree with me.
I did on Tuesday when I got back, because again Harris just looked very, very shaky. Now he's got 2 games against Sam Houston and UL Monroe that he's going to get a lot of time, and we'll maybe be able to see a little bit more, and maybe there'll be a true competition there. But
they were down big by the time he got in, and just kind of threw him in and threw him back out.
And really, you could see
it was just like, whoa,
it was
what's
really
going on?
discombobulated.
And it's a very intense situation right there, being down like that.
Brett, I'll take you on this one. I've heard so many negative things about Leonard Fournette this week, and this is a guy that his entire life, since he was in Pee Wee football, has been running through tackles, has been running away from players. He gets to the major college level. I don't know if they utilized him correctly or the way I would have utilized him, but I think that people have to pump the brakes a little bit and realize that it may take him a couple games to kind of get in gear here, but I think he's the real deal. Your thoughts on Fournette? His performance on Saturday night and your expectations going forward.
Yeah, I thought he looked very powerful in some of those collisions with seasoned Big Ten defensive players. He just didn't run through them like he was used to doing in high school, which I think he needed to go through a game like that to realize how much more nuanced the college game is, and to learn when he can do that and learn a little more about pad leverage and when he has to kind of not try to run over people, but try to kind of, do like I want to say kind of like a glancing blow, and do the spin and keep the balance and really work on refining his game as a running back. But in terms of his physical prowess, I mean, it's all there, and it's just he's going to be criticized because LSU fans were so relieved when he chose LSU over Alabama.
Yes.
And they saw what he did in high school, and so now when you win a recruiting battle like that, you think you should get instant dividends, and they're not going to get instant dividends. But Miles is happy with him so far, and so we'll see.
And he's got a target on his back.
He does. I saw one play where I saw the inexperience, and that was he should have scored that touchdown. I mean, there was one-on-one with the safety. It looked like there was daylight on the left side. And a safety got him. I mean, it brought him down. It looked like and I wonder if he thought in his mind, I got this guy. I can run right through him, and I think he saw quickly that he can't do that, and I thought that was a bad read by him because there was daylight on the outside. If he has the ability to bounce it outside, maybe should have done that. But other than that, I don't know that he was really put in a lot of positions to be successful. And in regards to the fans, the expectations, look, the Adrian Peterson comparisons, his own head coach calling him Michael Jordan.
Yes.
I mean, you're feeding into that a little bit, and then in the next breath say, oh, he did a fantastic job, let's hold off here. So it's not all us fueling this thing here.
Agreed, agreed.
There was a lot expected of him, but anybody that thought he was just going to walk on the field and just run for 250 yards on 12 carries and 4 touchdowns, that's just ridiculous expectations. It's not going to happen. It may not even happen when he's a junior or senior, when the way LSU likes to platoon their backs, the way they do it.
Because it will be running back by committee. I mean, they got a stable of backs back there, and again, they're going to probably go with the hot hand before it's all said and done. A lot of us were really hesitant to call this a rebuilding year because of the plethora of talent that they have, but it kind of is a rebuilding year, isn't it? I mean, this is a team that, they got out of the situation in Houston with a win with Wisconsin. That's a big plus. But you got a gauntlet going through that SEC West. Brett, what's the expectations for this team going forward?
Well, I think they could still easily lose 4 games in the SEC schedule, or 3, 4. But they do have the talent to surprise us and do better. It just really depends on what they learn. I think it's great that they were able to come back in this game. It's a weird game to evaluate because once Wisconsin scored in the third quarter early, I said, well, LSU has shown no evidence that they can come back from this. No evidence. I mean, I might have even turned the game off if I wasn't professionally obliged to watch it until the end. So, and then what I saw kind of amazed me. And so, now they are going to play some lesser opponents, but this first game, I think, will give them a lot of film and a lot of lessons to grow from quickly. And if their learning curve is steep, then they could be better than maybe I thought coming into the year, where I thought they were vulnerable to as many as 5 losses.
It all depends on how quickly these freshmen and these first-time starters figure it out. They all have the talent to figure it out. Can they pick it up quickly? That'll be the telltale sign. They can pick it up quickly. This team can be a big-time team this year. But they're young players, first-year starters, inexperienced players. It's, as you said, the learning curve. How quickly they pick it up. When they figure it out, that's when this team's really going to be something. Now, is that week 6 after they go 4-2? Is that week 10? Is that 2 weeks from now? So we'll see. But I think that's the underlying theme here. These inexperienced guys that have all the talent in the world, when do they figure it out?
I think this team goes as the offensive defensive line go. I think if those two groups perform well, this team's got a chance to really do something this year. If they don't, and you're relying on a lot of these young players at the skill positions to get you there, I think you're going to have a real problem. Boy, I tell you, Heartbreak Hotel in Tulsa. Tulane loses 38-31 in double overtime, but what an exciting game. And the first thing I took away from this is Tanner Lee is the real deal. Brett, your thoughts on Tanner Lee? And I mean, I think he can make all the throws. He seemed to be poised. They got themselves a heck of a quarterback.
Thank God for DVR. I covered the Saints game and then went home and watched that game on DVR, and I knew the result, but I still couldn't wait to see how it played out because it was obvious. I mean, 2 years. This team is going in the right direction. 2 years ago, even before the horrible injury to Devin Walker, they were getting run out of that stadium. And that was Curtis Johnson's first year. And they had a lot of young guys in the field, and it was kind of a patchwork roster. And this year, they should have won the game. And, it was kind of a lesson that they have to learn on the road in a competitive game in a season opener early in the season. But Tanner Lee, he's a redshirt freshman. He's got a lot of good things ahead of him. And I think the team as a whole looks strong. To be in a position where they should have won at Tulsa in a season opening game is not the Tulane that we've seen in the last 10 years.
Yeah, for sure.
Look, I love Tanner Lee. I mean, the way he throws that seam route, that's a difficult throw to make in college. Best thing about that game, though, when was the last time we've ever seen this? Well, this was going through my head as I'm watching the game. Jesuit, John Curtis, West Jeff, Brother Martin.
That was the best part of the game.
I mean, the whole time you see a kid catch it. Oh yeah, John Curtis, Beatty, John Curtis, the interception, West Jeff, quarterback, Jesuit, the Dante Butler, Brother Martin. I mean, local talent making plays. And I'll say this team has grown. Not 100% sure where they want to be depth-wise, and I think it's very possible this team improves from last year, but may not have the same record.
I agree with that.
But it is so fun to watch, and Tanner Lee looks like the real deal. I agree with you 100%, and I really like it. They made the right choice with Tanner Lee.
I tweeted about the same thing you're saying. The homegrown talent, to me, that was the most impressive thing. To see the speed and athleticism on the field that we know we have here in Louisiana, and to see that within a Tulane uniform, it was exciting to see. You mentioned Sherman Beatty, my gosh, the Jets he has, and then you could go right down the line of all the local talent that was involved in that game, even though they came out with a loss. They're going to have to get bigger on the front lines, offense and defensive line. And they may have to go out of state to do that when it's all said and done, because a lot of that homegrown talent gets snapped up by the big boys. But when you talk about the plethora of skill positions that they have in this state, wow. You know, the fact that Tulane was able to capture what they've had so far, I think the sky's the limit for this program long term. It's going to be tough year this year, but long term.
And you know, Curtis Johnson, he's obviously a rookie head coach, but he's not a rookie coach in terms of developing players. And at Tulane, you have the luxury, unlike LSU, where you can bring a guy in and develop him. You can redshirt him. You can develop this talent and get him on the field. And I just think right now you're seeing a lot of the local talent, and they look well coached. And that to me is a sign in the right direction. And you just believe in what Curtis Johnson is doing. When was the last time we really could say that about Tulane? So I think it was a loss, and I know that stings for the Green Wave, but I think there is such thing as a good opening day loss. That was it. One
thing that I am concerned about is the kicking game. I mean, you got to have a competent kicker in today's college football, and in Louisiana we got a competent kicker somewhere, and that's something they've been talking about throughout the offseason. That's been a little shaky in that position, and it ended up being kind of their demise in that game against Tulsa.
Yeah, well, I mean, he may have to go back to Brazil in this offseason and start looking for the next Cairo Santos. But yeah, I mean, I think that anytime you lose a guy like Santos, it's going to be tough to replace him, and then that's it could have been first game jitters. I mean, it was bad because it was a chance for a potential game-winning kick, and they're sorting through the roster. I think they had a guy from the baseball team trying out to see if he could do it. The kicking game is a concern for now. But generally, when you talk about the local talent, it's not only made them competitive, I think it's ingratiating them to the community again.
I agree with that.
It's because football fans from New Orleans recognize the players. Their families, their extended families, want to go to the new Tulane Stadium and tailgate on campus, and it's just creating tremendous momentum in terms of on-the-field production and in the stadium, on campus, good feeling about Tulane. So
it's going to be exciting. Saturday afternoon, Yeoman Stadium, Georgia Tech. That's a tough game because of the triple option. It's going to be tough to stop, but they're going to have quite a bit of fans out there. I got about a minute left, guys. Tulane, let's talk about their record this year. What do you think they're going to do? Is this a bowl team, or is this a team that's maybe on the outside looking in a bowl?
Right on the cusp. I'll say 6 wins, maybe 7. I think, as I've said, I think they can improve and have a worse record than last year. But I think they'll be improving, be a much better team towards the end of the year. And I just think, look, there's excitement surrounding this team, and I think that's always a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah, today I expect them to be around 500 and maybe bowl eligible. They should play well at home. Today, Rick Dixon said that they are virtually sold out of the entire home schedule.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, within like 2,000 or fewer tickets available for any given game. And this game is sold out, and homecoming only has hundreds of tickets left. So, it's everything's looking up in terms of support and the talent. So they just have a tougher schedule this year, and they're going to have to see how they do.
It's going to be easier to recruit these local players if you can fill Yeoman Stadium. That's for sure. Sean Fazan, Fox 8 Sports, Brett Martell, the Associated Press. Thanks so much for being with us tonight here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Remember, there is a rebroadcast of this show each and every Friday night right here on WLAE TV and Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette at 10 p.m. Also, you can catch me on the radio weekdays, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m., 9:90 a.m. WGSO. And if you've missed any of the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports, you can catch those at ericasher.com, as well as you can download my podcast or listen live to my radio show at ericasher.com as well. Special thanks to our guest, again, Sean Fazan of Fox 8 Sports, Brett Martell, the Associated Press, and also to the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juno, Amanda Lyons, Naila Jones, and my director, William Hill. For Sean Fazan, for Brett Martell, my name is Eric Asher. Thanks so much for watching Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll see you right back here next Thursday night, 6 p.m. Good evening.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by